Greetings and a warm welcome to the Zoho Creator Insights webinar. In celebration of Developer Month in September, we invite all the creators to take part in this year's Creators Cup. Keep engaging with all the LinkedIn posts throughout the September. So I'm Ilabarasi, a member of Zoho Creator team, and I'm excited to share with you how Zoho Creator Get Record APIs can help you to extend your workflow capabilities. So we have some vital points to go over. All the participants will be on mute. If you need any additional information or questions to be answered, please don't hesitate to use the chat or questions panel. The session is being recorded and you will receive the recordings via email. Your feedback is essential to us, so please fill out the post-session survey. Without further ado, let's begin our session. To kick off this webinar, we'll be discussing on the agenda for today. First, I'll provide an overview of Zoho Creator and its API, including how they function and their key concepts. Next, I'll showcase you a live demonstration of making an API request and explore the real-world scenarios and use cases of using an API. Post which, we will have a Q&A session wherein you can ask your questions and we will clarify your questions over there. Before diving into the main topics, let me give you a brief introduction to Zoho Creator. It is a low-code application development platform that enables users to build their business apps and utilize them on web, mobile, and tablet devices. With our intuitive development platform, businesses across industries can transform their ideas into applications to encourage rapid growth and competitiveness. Creator also offers pre-built integration and RESTful APIs to help you to connect with existing software systems, old as well as new, and to streamline your digital transformation by augmenting, not replacing the legacy system that still works for your business. Talking about Zoho Creator, it has been a reliable option for over 17 years, gaining the trust of more than 15,000 plus customers. It has powered the creation of 7 million plus apps, which are being used by 6 million plus users around the globe. The platform is also packed with numerous features and functionalities to explore. So now let's dive into our session of API. So when an API is required, API is required when you would need to do an integration between systems. So what is integration then? Managing different set of data from various sources can be challenging. That's where the data integration comes in. It is a process that allows you to combine information from different applications securely. Integrations are like the bridges that connect different services and business suites, making it easier for you to collaborate and keep your data consistent and secure. Having said that, now let's look into the methods of integration. Zoho Creator supports 3 different methods of integration. One is integration task. Secondly, using integration flow, you can make an integration to any third-party services or Zoho services. And then using RESTful APIs, you can also do the integration. So now let's look into each of the integration types one by one. First, we have this integration task. Integration tasks are the predefined syntaxes or functions which can be used to integrate your data with Zoho services and third-party services. Using this integration task, we can fetch, add, modify, and delete the record of the respective supported services. And this is the predefined syntax format for the integration task. So if you're going to do an integration with Zoho services, you'll be mentioning Zoho and the service that you're going to use. It could be CRM, books, projects, or tests. So you can mention the service. And then the action that you're going to make, whether you are going to fetch the data or modify the data or delete the data, right? So you can mention the defined task, and also the parameters need to be passed. So within the parameters, let's say you're going to integrate with CRM, then the contact module or lead module also need to be mentioned, the organization ID, and several other parameters also need to be passed in an integration task. So this is for the Zoho service. If you're going to use it for third-party services, the specific third-party name has to be mentioned over here. Secondly, we have the integration flow, using which you can easily integrate with third-party solutions. To use this integration flow, It is not necessary for one to know coding or technical background to integrate the system. We can just click and configure the integration data flow of various systems easily. Finally, we have Creator REST APIs. Before we go into the REST APIs, we will first understand what is an API. API is an application programming interface, provides a means for two distinct software applications to communicate with one another. Acting as a conduit between an application and a server, an API enables the exchange of data, allowing for the seamless integration and operation of the independent systems. The use of API has become increasingly prevalent in modern business and academic settings as the ability to connect disparate systems can lead to more efficient and effective operations. Now, let's discuss on how API works. So to keep it simpler, let us take this use case. This is a restaurant use case wherein the customer comes in and will make an order to the waiter. So the waiter will take the order and pass it to the chef who will prepare the dish. The chef will, once the dish is prepared, he will pass it back to the waiter, and the waiter will deliver the order back to the customer. So this is the similar use case, even how API works. So the client is any front-end application that the user interacts with. The server or the backend system is the backend logic or the database operation. In this scenario, an API works as a middle layer between the client and the server, making it possible to send data requests and receive responses. There are mostly major types of API that are used. However, REST and SOAP are the most widely used types of API. So REST supports XML, JSON, and plain text as an exchange of a request. However, SOAP API supports only XML data exchange. Compared with the SOAP API, REST API has a faster performance due to the smaller messages and caching support. And the SOAP messages are slower and larger, which makes the communication slower. Now, let's look into how REST API model works. Similar to how API works is the same operation, even the REST API model works. So the client will make a request. So when it comes to the REST API model, you can make 4 different types of requests: get, post, put, and delete. So get is a method used when you would like to fetch a data from a third-party service or a third-party database. Post is a method used when you would like to add a data to the third-party system. Put is to update the data, and delete is to delete the data from the server or your third-party application. So the client can make either of these 4 requests to the API. So the API will take the request of the client and pass it to the backend server or the third-party application. So this API request which we have passed will be converted into an HTTP request that can be accessed by the third-party server or the application. This will work on the request that was provided by the API and give an HTTP response. So this HTTP response will again be changed into JSON, XML, or HTML formats to the client based on the client request using this REST API model. So this REST API model is known for its simplicity and ease of use. And Zoho Creator also uses this REST API model for making it all easier for the users to make use of the operation. Now let's explore how Zoho Creator and API integration provide a valuable assistance to a business. Before that, we'll understand the key concepts of using an API. So the main concept of using an API is to authenticate and authorize it. Authentication and authorization are 2 critical concepts in access control. So the authentication is verifying the true user or the entity of who's making a request, while the authorization ensures that the user or entity receives the right access or permission in a system. So basically, when you're making an API request, you will be identified whether you are a registered user in order to do a particular API request. In the authorization process, it will check whether you are an identified person to do an certain operation, to do a certain task using an API request. So in Zoho Creator, the authentication is very secured in a way that only the super admin of the account will be able to do the authentication process, like generating authorization code and defining the actions. So now let's look into the types of authorization. So there are various types of authorization methods like API key, barrier tokens, JWT barrier, basic, OAuth 1 and OAuth 2. However, Zoho Creator uses OAuth 2 type of an authorization. So compared with all the other types of authorization, OAuth 2 is more secured and a best way to use the authorization. So with this OAuth 2, you will first retrieve an access token for the API, then using that token to authenticate the future request. These access tokens are typically short-lived, but the authorization server can also provide a long-lived refresh token. This client application can use this refresh token to automatically refresh the access token. So in Zoho Creator, there are 5 different methods that you would be required to do in order to generate an access token. First, you would be required to register as a client, post which you have to generate the authorization code. And then using that authorization code, you can generate access tokens. So these access tokens will be valid for a certain period. Hence, if you wanted to refresh the access token, then that is where the fourth step comes into play. The fifth step is once the API is no longer needed. So that is when you can use a revoke the refresh token in order to revoke the access of the API. Let's look into each of the 5 steps individually in detail. First is to register your client application. So in order to allow any third-party applications to integrate or communicate with Zoho Creator, you must register it with Zoho. So in order to do a registration, we have to make use of the Zoho Developer Console where you can do a self-registration. So since the Zoho Creator application is going to be used, the client type of self-client can be used. Second step is to request for the authorization code. So this Zoho Creator uses the authorization code as a grant type. So the client application will therefore require an authorization code to get an access token. So in order to get the access token, we have to make use of our developer console and generate the authorization code first in order to get an access token. So that can be done by passing the defined scopes, right? So this is where the actions can be mentioned while doing the authorization process, whether you would like to create a report or you would like to fetch the data or you would like to add a data, right? So those scopes can be mentioned. Post which you will also get the authorization code when you click on create button. The third step is to get the access token using the authorization code. So once the client application receives an authorization code, it can exchange for an access token by making this following request. So this is the request URL which need to be used, wherein you will pass the base account URL, OAuth, what type of authorization is. It is v2.1 type of authorization. And we have to pass the tokens. So which is the grant type is authorization code, and the client ID and client secret, which we will fetch it from the previous step from our API console, and the redirect URI and the authorization code, which we would have generated in the previous step. So this has to be passed. So once we hit this request, as a result, we will get the access token as well as the refresh token. So this access token will be valid only for an hour. So in certain cases, you can make use of this refresh token, which you would have got in the previous step, in order to generate another access token. So in order to do that, we can make use of the below request URL, wherein the base account URL, and then you will mention the refresh token, which you would have got in the previous step, client ID and client secret, and also the grant type as refresh token. By making this request, you will generate another access token, which will be valid for another hour. So once you no longer require the data of the particular scope, you can revoke the refresh token by raising a revoke token request using this URL. So now let's see how a get record API request can be made. So as we already know, there are 4 different methods that can be used in a REST API model: get, put, post, and delete. However, in this webinar, we are going to see how get record API can be done. So get is a method. Using this API method, you can fetch the records displayed by a report. Its response will contain all the data or all the fields that are present in the certain report. A maximum of 1,000 records can be fetched per request. So in order to get a request, you have to make use of this request URL, wherein you'll be mentioning your base URL and then the account owner name to which you're going to make an integration, the app link name, and the report link name. So along with this request URL, we would also be required to pass certain headers. So in this header, you have to pass the authorization as a header, in which you will be mentioning the access token which you would have got and which is also valid. So in certain cases, you might have enabled environments for your application. So environments are nothing but a test space wherein you will place your application in development and staging environments and then push it to the production one for testing and publishing the app. So in certain cases, you can also mention the environments to which you're going to make this API request and test it out. And you can also mention the header as demo username in order to check which demo user is going to check it. So when you have more than 1,000 records, in those cases, you would be required to fetch the second set of data. So in that case, you can mention the read cursor and pass the value in order to fetch the consecutive batch of 1,000 records if they exist. At last, we have the accept as a key, wherein you can mention which type of API response need to be displayed, whether it's a JSON format or a text or TSP format response that you wanted to see. So these are the headers that need to be passed. So among all these headers, authorization is a mandatory header which we need to pass. And then an OAuth scope for using this get record API. This is the OAuth scope that we need to use, which is Zoho Creator.report.read. And then we can also make use of the parameters. So these parameters, we have 4 different parameters that can be used. One is the criteria. So the criteria using which you want the API request to filter the target report. And then we have this field configure, which is again an optional parameter. So using this field config parameter, you can get the certain view of the report. So let's say you wanted to fetch the quick view of the report, you can, by default, it is the quick view value. If you wanted to fetch the detailed view of the report, you can mention as detailed view. If in case you wanted to fetch all the fields that are available in the certain form, then you can mention it as custom. And then we have the field string, which is also an optional parameter. So all the required field link names as individual comma separated strings will be listed out. And then we have the max record, which is again an optional parameter, an integer parameter. Using this parameter, you can mention what number of maximum records that should be fetched upon one request. So you can mention the possible values as 200, 500, or 1,000. So once you make this request, so let us see how a sample request would look like. So this is the sample request wherein you can see the URL. So this is the base URL, which is creator.zoho.com, and then the account owner name, application name, and the report that you would like to fetch. And within the header, we have to pass the map value, which is the authorization, and the key value, which is the access token. And then we have to mention the request type as get. So when we are making a request in an Zoho service, this is how a sample request would look like. So this will be done using an invoke URL task. So to make a request in Zoho services or to make an integration within the Zoho services, an invoke URL deluge task should be used. And this is the format of the syntax of the deluge task. So this is an invoke URL task inside which you'll be mentioning the URL value, the type of request that you're going to make, any headers or parameters that you would be required to pass, the response format, the connection link names can also be passed in this invoke URL task. So once you make a request, this is how a sample API response would look like, which will contain all the fields that you have in a report will be displayed out. Before going into the live demonstration, let us see a use case using which we can make a live demonstration of the same. So this is Sarah, who is doing an e-commerce online business, and she is managing all her order management process and financials all manually, which is a very tedious task to do. So that is when Sarah came to know about Zoho Creator through her friend, using which she is managing all her orders with the help of order management application. And she is also using an accounting tool, which is a third-party accounting tool, which, which can also be integrated with Zoho Creator application, and which will make all our accounting as well as the order management process all automated. So by this use case, so we'll see how an order management application can be integrated with a third-party accounting tool or third-party services easily. So we are going to make use of this get record API in Postman, right? So the reason behind I'm choosing Postman over here is that was a common platform which we all will be familiar with. So the same method need to be used in any third-party service that you're going to use. So now let me quickly share my screen. So the very first step is to generate the authorization code by registering as a client in our Zoho developer console. So if we go to our API document, all the steps that you would be required to follow in order to do the authorization process will be listed out in our API document. So the very first step is to register your client application, which can be done from our Zoho developer console. So I have my Zoho developer console open over here. So there are different types of client types that can be chosen. However, self-client is the client type that you would be required to choose whenever you're going to integrate with any creator applications. So the very first step is to generate the authorization code. Since Zoho Creator is a self-client type of an application, we have to make use of this step, so which we have mentioned over here. So we have to mention the client ID, client secret, and we have to mention the scope in order to generate an authorization token, right? So in order to do that, we would be required to pass the scope. So now let us firstly go into our data APIs and get our scope. So inside this get record method, we have two different APIs, which is get record of detail view and get record of quick view. So when you know which particular record you would be required to fetch, that is when the get record detail view can be used. So you'll be passing an ID along with the API request, as you can see. So in our use case, so this is the order management application that we are taking in the Sarah's use case, wherein she would like to fetch all the customer details. So in that case, we will not know which particular data need to fetch. We need to fetch all the customer details that is available in this report. So in that case, we have to make use of the get record quick view API. So here, if we scroll down, we can see what scope need to be used. Let us quickly copy this scope and go to our API console. So this is the scope that we need to mention over here. So you can also mention the time duration of how long the authorization code can be valid. And you can also mention your scope description over here, which is fetch customer data, right? So once you hit on create, you will get an authorization code, right? So before that, we will go and into a our authentication process, and we have to go to generate tokens and copy this request URL in order to get an access token, right? So which we can do it from the Postman console. The method of request that need to be used is post. We can make this request as post. And we can also mention our base account URL, which is nothing but accounts.zoho.com. So all the parameters or all the values that you would be required to pass will be available in our API document. And then, so we can see all the parameters that we need to pass. The grant type is authorization code. we would be required to pass client ID, client secret, and the authorization code over here. So this authorization code is what we have generated from the API console, which we can copy and paste it over here. Similarly, we can also get the client secret and client ID from our API console itself. So which we have to mention in this space. Next, I'll copy the client secret and paste it over here. So the redirect URI is nothing but Zoho Creator's homepage URL. When you go to Zoho Creator's landing page, you can fetch the Zoho Creator redirect URI. So let me post that in the Postman console. So we have passed all the parameters that are required, and we have also reconstructed our URL as accounts.zoho.com. Now let us make a send request. So once we make a send request, we will get access token and refresh token. Using this access token, we can quickly make use of the get record API task, right? So in certain cases, the access token will be expired. So let me also show you a case wherein you can see how the refresh tokens can be used in order to generate new access tokens, right? So this step is required only when the access tokens are expired. So for this webinar, I'm just going to show you that part as well. So in order to do that, let us again go back to our API document. So this is the specific document which we need to refer, which is refresh the access token. We can quickly copy this request URL and post it in our Postman console. The method of request that we need to make is post. And we can also change our base account URL as accounts.zoho.com. So here, these are the parameters that we need to pass, which is the refresh token. This refresh token can be fetched from our previous step. We can copy this refresh token and paste it over here. Similarly, the client ID can be fetched from our API console. And the client secret can also be fetched from our API console. This is the grant type that we need to use, which is refresh token, in order to generate new access tokens. So now let me hit on send request. So here is where we have got the new access token, which can be used. So this again, I'm reiterating, this step is required only when your access tokens are expired. So now let me make an get record API request. So let us go back to our API document and refer to our get record quick view API document. So this is the URL that we need to use. Just quickly copy it and paste it in our Postman panel. The method of request is get, and we have to mention the base URL. So the base URL is nothing but creator.zoho.com. Again, when you come to the document, you can refer it over here. Just copy it and paste it over here. So the account owner name is nothing but the creator application owner name, right? So which we can fetch it from our application URL. And then we have to mention the application link name to which you are going to make an integration. So I'm going to integrate with this order management application, which I can copy and paste it over here. Again, we have to mention the report link name to which we are going to fetch all the details in it. So let me put it over here. So apart from that, what are the other things that we need to do is to pass an header value as authorization, and we have to mention Zoho OAuth token and the access token that we have generated. So let us copy the key and go to our Postman console, go to header section and paste the key. The value again will go to our API document. It need to be mentioned in this manner. So let us copy it and again paste it in our Postman console. So instead of the sample access token, what I'm going to do is we are going to make use of the access token which we have generated for our request. Now we can make a send request. So when you hit the send request, you can see all the data that is available in the report will be fetched. Currently, I have two different customer details, which is being fetched and is being shown in our API response, right? So this is the response that we used to get, which will be in a JSON format. So in the similar way, you can also do an API request in your third-party application to which you're trying to do an integration, and you can do all the other set of process like inserting the details which you have got from the API request to the specified module of your third-party service that you can do from your third-party systems. So now let me also show you how a live demonstration of making an API request would look like in Zoho service. So for our case, I'm going to take our accounting tool, which is Zoho Books, and I'll show you the live demonstration of the same. So the use case is same again. So we are going to fetch all the customer details to our accounting tool, which is Zoho Books, right? So in order to do that, we have to write an automation task, which we can do it from our API Zoho Book settings. And when we go to the automation tab, we can write our functions or any custom automations that we need to do. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a scheduled workflow in order to fetch all the customer details on a daily basis. So let me create a new scheduled workflow and name it as fetch customers. So you can mention which is going to be the start date and time. So I'm going to mention it as 21st of 9 a.m. every day, right? So as we saw already in our presentation, we have to make use of the invoke URL task when you're going to make any API request, right? So we can mention the invoke URL task. So let me name it as get access token. So the reason behind I'm doing this is I'm going to do it all again from scratch in order to show you how we should generate access token or how we should refresh the access token and then make an API request in a Zoho service, right? So now in order to get an access token, we have to make use of this URL, which is generate access tokens, which we can fetch it from here and we'll paste it within strings. So the base account URL is accounts.zoho.com. And then we have to mention the client ID, client secret, redirect URI, and authorization code. So in order to do that, firstly, let us go to our data API and copy the scope that need to be used in order to generate an authorization code. So this is the scope that we need to use. Let us go to our API console and generate the authorization code. I'm going to mention it as 10 minutes, fetch all customer. Click on create. We have received an authorization code. Let us copy it and paste it over here. And then we have to mention the client ID and client secret, for which I'm going to copy it from our API console and paste it over here. Similarly, I'll also copy the client secret. So again, the redirect URI need to be mentioned, which we can copy the URL of our Zoho Creator homepage and replace this over here. So the type of request that we need to use is post. You can again refer to our API document and see what type of request that need to be used in order to generate the access token, right? So we will not be required to pass any parameters or headers. In order to generate access token, let us do an info statement to see the response of it. Let me copy the variable name. So the response will get stored in the variable called get access token, which I'm going to do the info. So we can again recheck our URL, which is accounts.zoho.com. The grant type is authorization code, client ID, the client secret, redirect URI, and we have the code, the authorization code that we have generated. Now, let us save and execute the script. So it says executed successfully, and we have got the access token and the refresh token. So which we can paste it over here for our reference, right? So for in this demonstration, I'm going to skip the part wherein how you can do the generate the new refresh tokens. I'm directly going to use this access token and I'm going to make an get record API request. So in order to do that, firstly, I'll command this part, which is no longer required, and I'll make one more invoke URL task, which is called customers. So let me copy the URL, request URL from our API document. And paste it with a nav. So here the base URL is going to be creator.zoho.com, which we can refer in our API document and paste it over here. So the account owner name is nothing but the account to which I'm going to do an integration. So you would be required to do this API method of integration only when you have two different accounts. So in certain cases, if you have your Zoho Books and Zoho Creator subscription under your same account, then you can make use of the integration task in order to do the integration between two different products. So currently I have my Creator account under my demo account, and I have my subscription of Zoho Books under a different account. And that's the reason I'm making use of an API request. And then we have to mention the report link name, which is going to be customers. So we have to mention the request type, which is get. And if in case you would be required to pass any parameters and fetch the required data, you can pass the parameters. For now, I'm going to fetch all the data. So we have to pass the headers. So in a map format. So I'm quickly going to create a map report. So this is going to be the format of it. Firstly, we have to mention the key of it, which is authorization, which we can copy and paste our key. And second is the value of it, which is Zoho OAuth and the access token, which we can mention it within strings. And instead of the sample access token, we can make use of our access token, which we have generated currently. So instead of at last, we have to make a semicolon. Now we can make this map variable as our header. So in order to see the response, let us do an info statement. So we can recheck our request, which is we are passing a map variable into our header, and then this is our URL which need to be used, the creator account owner name, application link name, and the report link name. Now let us execute the request. It says executed successfully, and this is the response that we have got, right? So as you can see, two different details like email address, customer ID, phone number, everything is listed out in this response. This is a JSON response. If you'd like to see it over here, let me put it in a JSON formatter. So you can see these are the different details that we have got by making an API request, right? So this is how you would be required to do an API request within Zoho services. So not only this order management use case, You can also make use of this APIs whenever you need to make an integration with any third party, services like Salesforce CRM or HubSpot CRM, if in case you're using an third party CRMs. And then if you like to do an integration between any payment gateways, you can also do it using this APIs. And to our SMS service providers, right? So using this API, we are making our process simpler by automating all the things, which will make our business effective to productive as well. Hope the session was helpful. If you have any questions, you can post it on our question panel. We can assist you with your questions. So you can participate in our post-session survey. Share your feedback in the survey by scanning this QR code. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar today. I hope this is informative for all of you. And this is a recorded webinar session, so you will also receive a recorded webinar through email. So if you have any queries related to APIs or are related to your creator technical queries, you can always write to support@zohocreator.com as well as solutions@zohocreator.com. Please feel free to write any requests that you have. So thank you everyone for joining the session.